I am Eric Stinson with Northeast Nebraska Behavioral Health Network, and I am here with Matt Johnson, and I will let him introduce himself to you, and we'll just do a little background, and then we'll go through a few things why this occupation may appeal to you.
Awesome. Appreciate you having me today, Eric. Appreciate the time. Like Eric said, my name is Matt Johnson. I am a mental health therapist at LE Family Services, which is located in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. We've got a bunch of different locations in the Minnesota area, both in the metro and kind of outstate, but been in the mental health field for quite a few years. I want to say I got my master's back in 2007 and was working at a autism spectrum disorder clinic during my graduate time. So I've probably been in the mental health field for 15, 16 years. My undergraduate degree was in psychology from Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. And then from there, I continued on to go pursue my master's degree at the University of St. Thomas in the Twin Cities, specifically the Minneapolis campus, and got my master's degree in counseling psychology. And from there, I've just been kind of doing a couple different things in the mental health, but predominantly client-based therapy services, some groups, some family stuff, but predominantly outpatient mental health.
Great, great. So basically, what type of schooling was involved in getting your degrees?
Yeah, so obviously the college degree was a piece of it. The undergraduate degree, I pursued psychology. Initially, truth be told, my mom and a couple other people in my family have been in the mental health field. And so I was pretty accustomed to understanding what that was like. And honestly had some friends growing up that would come and talk to me because they knew my mom was a therapist. And so I'd be the guy that got to hear all the things from his friends. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I might want to do this for a career. So got the bachelor's degree in psychology and a couple other different things, but that was the main focus. And from there, went and got my master's degree. In order to work in an outpatient mental health clinic, there is a requirement for licensure. And so part of that piece of it is obtaining your master's degree. And from there, kind of completing some supervision hours under another licensed provider that's been board approved to do supervision. Basically kind of like an apprenticeship that you might find in the electrical field or plumbing field, where you have somebody kind of supervising your work. And then once you put in your required times and hours, you're allowed to practice independently and get credentialed with insurance companies to be able to see clients in a bunch of different settings.
Great. Are you focused on any particular aspect of mental health?
You know, I have not. And I think the reason is that I enjoy the variety of whatever kind of comes through the door, so to speak. I appreciate that there are so many different mental health things that go on for people on a day-to-day basis. And I love being able to kind of just meet people on their level and not feel like I'm so specialized or over-specialized in a certain parameter of the mental health field that I'm not able to work with other people. And so I think I've always kind of prided myself on being a jack of all trades, so to speak, and just kind of trying to be able to work with whatever kind of mental health issues kind of come through our referral process.
Great, great. What are some of the most common issues that you see in your profession?
Do you want to know during the pandemic or in general?
Let's go with in general, and then we'll maybe focus a little more since over the last few months, obviously that is
fair enough,
in everybody's mind, but hopefully that will be a situation that comes to a close at some point. Obviously not as soon as we had hoped, but
yes, let's hope so. I would say the prevailing issues that I see come through the door with regards to the clients that I work with are anxiety on some level, depression, to some extent, some suicidal ideations or thoughts, people that have maybe gotten out of more intensive outpatient mental health programs, family issues, couples issues, struggles with academics for teens and adolescents. I haven't worked a whole lot with the younger population, but really do enjoy working with adolescents. So I'd say the prevailing issues typically kind of go back to that anxiety and depression. And the reality is those things kind of exist on a continuum. There's very much a sense of, we all know what anxiety is because we've been dealing with that through COVID. We all know what depression is because we've also been dealing with that through COVID. I think that the awareness of all of us feeling a little bit stuck at times or limited in the things that we used to do versus what we're capable or able to do now. That creates a sense of helplessness or a sense of just kind of feeling stuck or handcuffed. And so I would say that getting back to the COVID piece, throughout now, the majority of issues are kind of that more significant struggles with anxiety and depression, because the reality is a lot of people have been living isolated because that's what this pandemic has brought onto us. And the effects of being isolated and away from people is kind of becoming more of a prevailing issue.
Sure, sure. You see that maybe mental health issues go hand in hand with dependency issues?
I haven't worked a whole lot with the chemical dependency side of mental health, but I would absolutely 100% agree that there is a mental health component to people that struggle with chemical health issues, whether that's alcohol abuse, drug abuse. The reality is that there can oftentimes, and really that's kind of the underlying existing condition that might lead people to engage in some of those behaviors. And I think that to try and pretend that mental health isn't a component of chemical health is a little bit not hard. It's hard for me to kind of wrap my head around, but I don't think that chemical health or that mental health rather leads to chemical health issues, if that makes sense. I think the reality of why I got into this field is to try and help people recognize when they're struggling and create some different ways of working through some of those emotional and mental health struggles so that it doesn't become a bigger issue. Because chemical health obviously adds another layer of complexity of people being able to kind of resolve what's going on from a mental health standpoint.
Sure, sure. I'm kind of going through some questions here that students may have.
Sure.
What in your opinion, why is your profession so important? And obviously you feel it's important or you wouldn't be doing it.
Agreed. Yeah. I don't know that there's ever, and I'll just use current times as an example, right? I don't know that there's ever been a time in our history that we have been a part of that everybody has been exposed to the same struggles and stressors and had the opportunity to kind of talk about things in a way that there's a unity around some of the struggles that we're kind of navigating. And the reality that is that creates a lot of emotional and mental health struggles for everybody. I think if anybody's trying to tell you that they're going through this current pandemic without struggling, they're probably lying to you, because the reality is there's so many different nuances of change and transition and frankly uncertainty that we're trying to navigate right now, that there's no way to not feel like you struggle with that at times, or drop the ball in certain areas, or let down significant relationships or people in your life or your workplace or whatever the case may be. So the reality is mental health is the thing that we all deal with. The parameter or the spectrum that exists on is different for everyone. But we all have feelings, we all struggle at times. And my goal in being in this field is to really try and create a safe space for people to put words to all those things that we really all are pretty familiar with and kind of deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. Have you found that over your time in your profession that, and this is, I guess, just a question that I came up with,
Sure.
That possibly more so when you first got into the profession, that there was a stigmatism with people that maybe were receiving care for mental health, and that they're much more willing to seek help today than maybe when you first got in?
Yeah, great question. When I started in the field, I think it was pretty synonymous that if you told somebody that you struggle with mental health, the first thought that a lot of people would have was, oh, you're crazy. Right? That's a word.
Absolutely.
That we all hear. Yeah, it's a word that we see kind of personified in television shows and movies and mass media of, if people are struggling, it's somebody that's in a straitjacket that's being led away on an episode of Law and Order, right? Like that's kind of the visual. And I think the reality is it's evolved a lot, even in the 16, 17 years that I've been doing this, to the point that mental health is something that's recognized by insurance companies, it's recognized by employers, it's recognized within social circles as a thing that people talk about, and even in mass media, right? I think we talk about all kinds of different television shows that have a mental health undertone to them, whether that's stuff on Netflix or Showtime or whatever. I mean, everybody has a situation that they see on television now where you can say, this person had an anxiety attack, or this person had some sort of depression issue. and people see that more often. So I think the light has been shined a little bit rather on what mental health is, frankly, what it isn't, and trying to bring a sense of there's a universalism to this idea of what mental health struggles are. And it doesn't mean you're crazy, and it doesn't mean that you need to be locked up. And it frankly doesn't mean that you need to be medicated, but there is an awareness that we all struggle with stuff. And the more that we can create safe places to talk about it, thank you, the better off we're all going to be.
Sure. And not having any background in it, just having the ability to speak about it, talk about it, have somebody that will listen, that's not judgmental, I'm sure is a tremendous portion of it.
Yeah. I mean, think about those things that we were all scared of as kids, right? The things that we would say, oh, there's a monster under my bed, just using that as a general example, right? And the more that we don't talk about those things, the bigger the issue becomes, right? We start saying, oh, that monster has 2 legs. And then you go, oh, that monster has 10 legs. And now he's the size of a mountain and he's still living under my bed. Mm-hmm. Versus being able to say, hey, mom or dad, will you check under my bed to see if there's a monster? And mom and dad go, oh, you're scared. And you go, well, maybe. And then they look under the bed and say, no, there's no monster there. Let's both look together. And so you shine a light under there and you say, oh, there's nothing really there. And then you tell your child, hey, if you start feeling scared again, come and talk to me. I'd love to just be able to like put it into words and let that thing kind of exist in this space. And for anything, especially as adults, and the things we're supposed to all feel like we have it together, right? As an adult, to this point, you're supposed to be a college student and you're supposed to have like your life figured out and you're supposed to have all these things figured out and you're supposed to have all these classes that you move from generals to a specific degree or pursuit that you want to have. The more that we can just acknowledge that we don't have it together, that we don't feel like we've got it squared away, and just put that into words, then at least other people can choose to engage with us on that and support us on that or not. But the more that we just leave it in our own heads, the more isolated we feel in dealing with some of that stuff.
Sure. What for you is the best part of your profession?
Man, I gotta say the substantive change that I get to see with people, right? The reality is not everybody that comes to therapy makes progress. And that was a big learning curve initially. And that it's very much dependent upon the individual client wanting to work on some of the things that they're there to work on. It cannot be dependent upon me or my skill sets or anything that I totally have the independence and freedom to kind of work on. But when you sit with somebody and you have a moment where you feel like you connected on something, or you feel like there's something that was an aha moment and they go, oh, I've never thought of it that way. Or, you're right, I was feeling that. And again, it's not me telling people how they feel, but it's me holding space with them and being authentically in that moment and present. When you see people kind of connect with something and be like, yeah, that does feel good. I think I am going to do something with that. And it's a sense of empowerment of wanting to do something differently than maybe they had been to that point. That's what gets me up in the morning and makes me want to continue to work with people.
Sure. And I can relate to that a little bit. I'm sure that just for those that are going to be viewing this, my background is I was a funeral director for 17 years. Mm-hmm. I had people say, how do you deal in a position where you're dealing with people at their worst? And I'm sure some of that was true with you. People from the outside would look and go, geez, you're dealing with people that are crazy all the time. How do you deal with it? But there's tremendous amount of satisfaction when you start at point A and you get to point B and maybe point C. Right. And maybe you're done at point C. Maybe you've achieved what you needed to achieve. And some maybe you never get beyond B, but there's got to be a tremendous amount of satisfaction.
Absolutely. And I think even to that point of like, how do you do it? I think my answer has always been because I get the opportunity to do it, right? Like you in your previous role, you got the opportunity to help families through a really difficult time. And that was part of your job, right? Like part of your job was to help people through something that was really difficult, that because you weren't invested in that process, because you weren't their family or their son or their whatever, you got to come at it from a unique perspective of saying, hey, I know that this is hard for you. And I've seen this happen for people before. I want you to know that I can help you get through this time in a way that feels like you're going to get through this on the other side and be able to say, yep, I can still continue on with life and feel like that wasn't fun, that wasn't enjoyable, but I'm going to continue to live my life and kind of go about business the way that I need to. And so I always tell people it's a privilege that I get to meet people in their most vulnerable places.
Sure. Describe one of your most challenging days.
Oh man, I think it's always a challenge to meet with clients that feel so isolated, depressed, alone, despairing about life that they're thinking about killing themselves. That idea of suicidality and people thinking about those ideas. Not even the people that think about it, because I think that there's a lot of argument that could be made that everybody has at some point thought of what suicide would be or what it would look like or whatever. And so I'm not here to say that everybody does, but I think when people do get to that point in their lives and it starts becoming a thing where they're actually letting it exist in a place where they're like, yeah, I've been thinking about this, or I have a plan about that. That's hard. And I think it's recognizing the humanity of that moment of like, I understand to some extent where you're at, but I'm not there with you right now. So I'm not going to pretend like I can be, or that I'm going to have all the answers for you, but I'm just going to be here with you. And I'm going to tell you that I'm not going to leave you alone. I had an experience a few years ago where had a client that, ended up committing suicide. And that hit hard. That was a very tangible, visceral response for me, because the reality is I felt badly for this person. And I felt badly that I wasn't able to help. And I think that I got a great piece of advice from my supervisor at the time that said, you're not responsible for your clients, you're responsible to them. And so if you can be present with them and feel like you put your best efforts forward and really try to be as helpful as possible to these people when they are struggling with these really significant issues, then you can feel crappy about what has happened, but you don't have to feel like you have to own that piece. And so that's probably the hardest piece, is recognizing that bad things happen to people for a bunch of different reasons. And as powerful as I may want to feel in my role, sometimes I cannot be the one that makes actual change happen for everybody, or make them feel like they've got a different answer other than that.
Sure. For somebody considering this profession, and I realize you're in the Twin Cities and Northeast Nebraska may be completely different.
Sure.
What kind of salary range could somebody expect to?
I think, yeah, good question. I think trying to figure out like what's the range or parameters of what people could make while working in this field, right?
And I realize that's obviously in the forefront of a lot of people's mind is, what can I make?
Yep.
More so
Absolutely.
than what good can I do? But
Well, I'll start off by saying this. I feel like it's a field that has a lot of job stability, frankly, right? Because there's that mental health isn't going away. There's always going to be a need for therapists to be able to meet people in the spaces that they're struggling. With that said, it's not a field that typically has a lot of financial reward if you only have your undergraduate or your Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor's of Science degree. It typically requires going to school for some sort of master's degree, mainly because once you have that, that's a level of credentialing that insurance companies recognize as having a particular sense of professionalism or specialty, and that's one that they reimburse at. We talk about being third-party payable, reimbursable. So insurance companies will recognize that after that person has gone through that master's level process and put in those supervision hours and done that. So with that said, that really is kind of a gateway for people. Once you have your master's degree and have done kind of those clinical hours of supervision and stuff, honestly, the sky is the limit for you based upon how hard you want to work and all of the different things that you want to do. If you wanted to go in a private practice where you were running your own mental health clinic and you were your own provider and taking care of all the things, it's easily a career that you could be in 6 figures, no problem. If you're wanting to work at like a mental health agency where people are doing kind of community-based mental health services or that kind of stuff, it's probably fair to say that you're anywhere between $50,000 and $75,000 working in some sort of setting like that. But truly from that gateway piece, the sky is kind of the limit with what you might want to do.
Okay. And not to keep you much longer, to kind of wrap up, in our part of the state, pretty much outside of the metro areas, we are pretty much underserved
Yeah.
by mental health and behavioral health. Do you feel that that is a standard throughout the country probably, or at least in the Midwest?
Yes, 100%. And I will tell you this, it is the thing that I'm probably most passionate about digging into at this point. Um, my roles have evolved. The company that I'm at currently is called Ellie Family Services. Ellie Family Services has a huge focus on bridging the gaps that exist in mental health. And one of those huge gaps is that lack of accessibility to services in rural and outstate areas. And so I think if we're going to talk about anything that's good that's come out of COVID and this whole pandemic, it's that insurance companies and all kinds of different reimbursers are recognizing the value that telehealth stuff like this can bring for people. Granted, I think any therapist will tell you that they like meeting their clients in person, face to face. But if I can reach somebody who lives in rural northeastern Nebraska that is 45 miles away from the nearest town where there might be a mental health clinic, and I can meet them in this place and create a safe space for them to kind of talk about stuff, that feels pretty authentic to me and pretty
Sure.
needed, frankly. And so I think that there's a huge groundswell from my company and others of trying to say, how do we start addressing the mental health needs of the communities that to this point have been dramatically underserved?
Sure. Well, I certainly appreciate your time. Hopefully this will be viewed by a lot of students. I know normally when it was held in person, they would have close to 1,000 students on campus.
Yeah.
Maybe 300 or 400 of them would attend the behavioral health, mental health aspect of it.
Sure.
And I certainly appreciate your time.
Hey, you let me know as soon as this pandemic is over, my friend. I think I will drive down to Nebraska and do that if you'll have me. I think that'd be an awesome opportunity to talk a little bit more with people about what mental health is and how to have it be a field that people want to continue to go into.
Absolutely.